Carla, amor mío, Mateo, mi amado hijo, Rubén, amigo del alma. Papá, mamá, me voy. No me busquen. Yo sé que entenderán que es por mi bien y por el bien de todos los que irán a mi lado siguiéndome en el camino. Estaré mandándoles un nuevo mensaje en cuanto llegue a la oficina. Calculo 15 o 20 minutitos.
Quizás no tan exagerado como Pablo, pero cuando manejes, sí olvídate del celular. Ya después lo vuelves a checar. Manejar y textear. La vas a pagar. Pagado por Nitsa.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a closer look at George Mitchell. Hey, what's going on, folks? We're going to talk a little bit about George Mitchell today. George Mitchell is one of the men named by Virginia Roberts as somebody who participated in Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking ring and somebody that she was given to for those purposes. Now, we haven't talked much about George Mitchell on this podcast, but today we rectify that situation. I'm going to start off by reading his Wikipedia page to you folks so that everybody has an idea who we're dealing with and why he is significant in the case. And then from there, we're going to jump into an article by the Philadelphia Inquirer that goes a little bit more into who George Mitchell is, what he was up to, what he is accused of, and what he has been doing while being under these accusations from Virginia Roberts. Now, again, George Mitchell is another one of these entrenched political elites. He was involved in politics for a very long time. He served for a very long time. He served in high positions. And as you'll hear in this profile, he was a man of means and a man of status. And what you'll hear in the article that follows the profile is that he was also part of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking ring. So, let's jump into this Wikipedia article and see what we can learn about Mr. George John Mitchell Jr. George John Mitchell Jr., born August 20th, 1933, is an American lawyer, businessman, author, and politician. A member of the Democratic Party, Mitchell served as a United States Senator from Maine from 1980 to 1995 and as Senate Majority Leader from 1989 to 1995. He briefly served as a United States District Judge of the United States District Court for the District of Maine from 1979 to 1980. And you notice, right off the bat, another kind of guy that Jeffrey Epstein would love to have in his orbit. Another man that Jeffrey Epstein would love to have under his thumb. Since retiring from the Senate, Mitchell has taken up a variety of positions in politics and business. He held a leading role in negotiations for peace in Northern Ireland and the Middle East, being appointed United States Special Envoy for Northern Ireland 1995 through 2001 by President Clinton, and as United States Special Envoy for Middle East Peace 2009 to 2011 by President Barack Obama. Now, do you see why this man isn't talked about in the media? Do you remember what Nancy Pelosi's daughter said? That how some of our faves are going to be caught up in this? Automatically reverting to tribalism, talking about our faves, and you're seeing it here. The United States media, the media here in the States, has no desire to dig deep into people like Senator Mitchell. They have no desire to dig deep into people like Senator Mitchell because they fear what they will uncover. They fear for their faves. They fear for their political friends. And I find that ghastly, I find it gross, and I find it disgusting. Whatever evidence I ever come across, I don't care who that evidence goes against. I will report it right away, because this is more important than political tribalism, folks. This is more important than carrying water from one side or the other. This is literally a battle for who we want to be as a people. Do we want to be a people that turns the other cheek when girls and young women are being trafficked by the most powerful in our society? Is that the sort of society we're going to be? Or are we going to stand up and say, look, enough is enough. We're not going to accept this anymore, and you all have to pay the price. He was the primary architect of the 1996 Mitchell Principles and the 1998 Good Friday Agreement in North Ireland, and was the main investigator in two Mitchell reports, one on the Arab-Israeli conflict, 2001, and one on the use of performance-enhancing drugs in baseball, 2007. Mitchell served as the chairman of the Walt Disney Company. Does that shock you? Again, who owns ABC? Who killed the Amy Robach story? Who else works for ABC? George Stephanopoulos, you say? Oh, yeah, that's right. So you see how the web is weaved. You see how all of it's intertwined, folks. And later as chairman of the international law firm DLA Piper. He was the chancellor of Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland from 1999 to 2009. Mitchell also has served as a co-chair of the Housing Commission at the Bipartisan Policy Center. We'll go right to his political career and skip his early life. I'm sure nobody cares about that. After having performed well academically at Georgetown, Mitchell served as a trial attorney for the Antitrust Division of the United States Department of Justice in Washington from 1960 to 1962, and then as an executive assistant to Senator Edmund S. Muskie from 1962 to 1965, where he first gained an interest in the political world. Great. That's perfect. How about, wouldn't life be grand for Virginia Roberts, especially if this guy would have never gotten into politics? This guy would have never been famous. This guy would have never been around Jeffrey Epstein. That would have been nice, huh? Afterwards, Mitchell practiced law in Portland, Maine from 1965 to 1977 and was assistant county attorney for Cumberland County, Maine in 1971. In 1974, Mitchell won the Democratic nomination for governor of Maine, defeating Joseph E. Brennan. He lost in the general election to independent candidate James B. Longley, but was appointed United States Attorney for Maine by President Jimmy Carter in 1977. Mitchell served in that capacity from 1977 to 1979. And it makes me think, what else was he up to in these official capacities before the internet was around? Who else was he hanging around with? What other sort of things was he doing when the curtains were drawn? If he is such a sick bastard that he would be involved with Epstein's trafficking ring, do you think that just happened overnight? This wasn't a man that just happened overnight with, right? He has those proclivities and he has those wants, would be my guess. Mitchell was nominated by President Carter on July 31st, 1979 to the United States District Court for the District of Maine, to a new seat authorized by Statute 92-1629. He was confirmed by the Senate on October 4th, 1979, and received his commission on October 5th, 1979. His service terminated on May 16th, 1980 due to his resignation. Now, as you folks can see here, this guy has been part of the bureaucratic nonsense of Washington, D.C. his whole life. He moved his ways up the slimy ropes of the bureaucratic realm and moved his way into a political office, and then obviously turned that political office into personal gain. Mitchell was appointed to the United States Senate in May 1980 by Governor of Maine Joseph Brennan when Edmund Muskie resigned to become the U.S. Secretary of State. After serving out the remainder of Muskie's term, Mitchell was elected to his first full term in 1982 with approximately 61% of the vote against Congressman David Emory and rose quickly in the Senate Democratic leadership. Oh, I bet he did. Hanging out with guys like Jeffrey Epstein, and I'm sure he was hanging out with Epstein's buddies. Oh yeah, I'm sure he rose through that leadership very quickly, right? Because they know the kind of guy that they have on their hands. They love a guy like this, don't they? The intelligence agencies love a man like this. He was elected as the chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in 1984, helping the Democrats regain control of the Senate in 1986 with a net 8 new seats and a 55-45 majority in the Senate. He served as Deputy President pro tempore in the 100th United States Congress because of the illness of the previous President pro tempore, John C. Stennis, and remains the only senator other than Hubert Humphrey to have held that post. The position... All right, this is all nonsense. I'm skipping all of that crap. In 1988, Mitchell was reelected with 81% of the vote, the largest margin of victory in a Senate election that year, and the largest majority ever for a senator from Maine. Senate Majority Leader. Mitchell served as Senate Majority Leader from 1989 to 1995. While in this role, Mitchell led the movements to reauthorize the Clean Air Act in 1990 and passed the Americans with Disability Act in the Act of 1990. Additionally, under his leadership, the Senate approved the North American Free Trade Agreement and the formation of the World Trade Organization. So it was under his leadership that NAFTA was created, that horrendous bill that was just completely and utterly destroyed. So again, what this is, folks, I'm just laying out the profile before we jump into the article. So for those of you who know who Bill Mitchell is already, just bear with me, we're almost there. In 1994, he turned down an offer of appointment by President Bill Clinton to the United States Supreme Court to replace retiring Harry A. Blackmun so that he could continue helping with efforts in the Senate to pass significant health care legislation. The seat ultimately went to Stephen Breyer. Nevertheless, Congress was not able to pass any significant health care legislation at the time, and Mitchell did not run for re-election in 1994. I'm guessing that he didn't want to become a Supreme Court justice because, he couldn't be doing what his hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein if he's part of the Supreme Court. So, that be damned, he has to make sure he's able to be as, silly as he wants to be with his buddy Jeff. In political leanings, for 1994, Mitchell's last year in the Senate, the American Conservative Union gave him a rating of 0.00 on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being the most conservative. For the same year, the Americans for Democratic Action gave him a score of 90 on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being most liberal. After the Senate. In the business world, Mitchell has served as a director of the Walt Disney Company, Federal Express Corporation, Xerox Corporation, Unilever, Staples Incorporated, Starwood Hotels and Resorts, and the Boston Red Sox baseball team. After leaving the Senate, Mitchell joined the Washington, D.C. law firm Werner, Lipfert, Bernhard, McPherson, and Hand. He later became the firm's chairman. He was criticized for lobbying on behalf of the firm's big tobacco clients. He is also senior counsel to Pretty, Flaherty, Bellevue, Pachios, Ulrich, and Haley in Portland, Maine. He is a partner and chairman of the global board of DLA Piper, U.S. LLP, a global law firm. Mitchell also served as an advisor of ZeniMax Media Incorporated. In 2007, Mitchell joined fellow former Senate Majority Leaders Howard Baker, Bob Dole, and Tom Daschle to found the Bipartisan Policy Center, a nonprofit think tank that works to develop policies suitable for bipartisan support. Oh, please, give me a break. Give me a break with this guy. So there's a bunch of other stuff he was involved in, like the Northern Ireland peace process, chairman of Disney, that like we talked about, the baseball steroids investigation, special envoy for the Middle East peace. I'm not going to read all of this stuff because, you get the idea of who he is at this point. So this is a man who is just entrenched in the American political system. This is a man that has no business hanging out with a guy like Jeffrey Epstein. Certainly has no business being involved in a trafficking ring and having relations with a young girl who he has no idea who she even is. He just shows up and he thinks it's okay to have sex with some girl that his buddy Jeffrey's providing for him. How is that kind of guy the sort of person you want running or ruling anything that has to do with politics? It's not, but they're everywhere. They're sprinkled throughout every bit of power sector in the whole entire world. A little blurb here, one little paragraph talks about the scandal. A woman who has long claimed disgraced money man, pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, forced her to have sex with powerful men, named Mitchell in documents unsealed August 9, 2019 by federal prosecutors in New York at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The papers included affidavits and depositions of key witnesses in a lawsuit the now 33-year-old woman Virginia Roberts filed against Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. In 2015, Roberts accused the duo of keeping her as a trafficking victim in the early 2000s when she was underage. Mitchell denied ever having met or spoken with Roberts. And that's it. That's all Wikipedia has on Wikipedia has on the situation with Mitchell and Virginia Roberts. They don't go into any more detail, nothing like that. Just a quick little blurb because it looks like they have to do it, right? Oh, well, we'll add it because we have to. Meanwhile, we all know that the whole entire the Wikipedia article, the whole thing should talk about his attachment to Epstein at this point. All right, so the article we're going to read, like I said, is from the Inquirer, and the headline is, Ex-U.S. Senator accused in Jeffrey Epstein scandal oversaw Philly Archdiocese Sex Abuse Compensation Fund by Jeremy Roebuck. Among the prominent men accused of sexual abuse in a bunch of recently unsealed court documents tied to financier, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein's alleged trafficking of underage girls, one name stood out to clergy sex victims in Philadelphia, George J. Mitchell. So, folks, this guy is he oversaw the Philadelphia Church Sex Abuse Compensation Fund, and he is being accused of taking part in the sex trafficking ring of Jeffrey Epstein. That's how closed off this society has become. That's how sick things in this society has become, folks. This man, who is being credibly accused by Virginia Roberts of raping her when she was a sex trafficking victim, is also in charge of the fund that has to do with the priests and abusing underage boys. You can't make this stuff up. This is not the sort of stuff you can make up. Even in a book, you couldn't make this up. Better known for his stints as a Senate majority leader and a U.S. Special Envoy, Mitchell until May had led the board overseeing the Archdiocese of Philadelphia's compensation fund for those abused by priests. Wow. So an abuser is going to decide what survivors get from other abusers? That sounds like it's going to go over well. Why don't we just have the investigators investigate themselves again? Although he has forcefully denied the claims and his accuser has offered few details of their alleged encounter, the news has drawn consternation and bewilderment from Philadelphia area victims and their advocates. As it should. This man should have never been involved in overseeing any of this, especially after the documents leaked. Especially after the documents came to light. Especially after Virginia started telling her story. This smarmy son of a bitch should have never, ever been involved in this. This is horrible. And imagine if you're one of these young boys who were abused by a priest and you realize that a predator is sitting on the board and he's going to be the one who dishes out the funds to you. Talk about an absolute just abandonment of justice. Some simply smirked at the optics that the man handpicked to oversee the Archdiocese's most significant attempt to date to compensate abuse victims had himself been accused as an abuser. Others said that Mitchell's ties to Epstein have only deepened their reservations about the church's reparations process, a program many of them already viewed with skepticism. It sounds just like the fund that they wanted to set up for the victims, survivors of Epstein, right? Let's come on in. We'll dole you out some cash, but you have to sign this NDA and you can't tell your story. We own your story now. You can't write a book. You can't go on a speaking tour. You can't become a coach to try and help women through and tell your story. We own it now. Here's a few books. Go away. Unacceptable. No NDAs ever in cases like this. It doesn't surprise me at all, said John Delaney, who has alleged his childhood priest raped him when he was a 12-year-old altar boy at St. Cecilia Parish in northeast Philadelphia and who rejected a compensation offer from the fund. It definitely calls into question the entire effort if Mitchell did this. 100%. Just being accused of that at this high level. Why are you going to be involved in this? Don't you have any compassion for the survivors? Don't you have any compassion for the people that you're supposed to be doling this dough out to? Don't you care how it looks? George Mitchell, you should be embarrassed of yourself. But to be embarrassed, you'd have to actually have some empathy and you'd have to actually be self-aware. And you're none of those things, sir. What you seem to be is an absolute and utter ingrate. My opinion, but that's what it seems like to me. But Kevin Gavin, a spokesperson for the church, said that the church's officials remained grateful for Mitchell's guidance and cited the more than $19.6 million the Philadelphia Compensation Fund gave to more than 79 abuse victims between November and May. Like the money makes it all right. Like the money makes it okay. What the money is? The money is a little bit of compensation because they couldn't get justice, okay? I bet you if you ask any of these survivors, what would you rather have, some money or to see Jeffrey Epstein prosecuted, to see all of his people prosecuted? I bet you a very large percentage of them would prefer prosecution. It's not about the money. And for places like the church and Jeffrey Epstein's estate to make it all about the money, it's ridiculous, okay? It is ridiculous. Now, don't get me wrong. They deserve this money. They should get this money. But people like Mitchell shouldn't be the arbiter of where it goes and how it's distributed. George Mitchell should go and retire and do whatever it is these old bastards do in their later years because there is no place for him on the public stage anymore. The senator's efforts always focused on how to help heal victims, Gavin wrote in an email. Senator Mitchell and the other two distinguished members of the Oversight Committee have done remarkable work. Oh, I'm glad, Gavin, that they have done remarkable work. I'm glad that the church thinks so. I'm glad that the church is so forgiving. Doesn't shock me, though, with them being fellow travelers and all. So, look, save it, okay? Save your platitudes. Save your ingratiating remarks. We know what George Mitchell is at this time, okay? If we believe Virginia Roberts about one allegation, why would we not believe her about all of them? My body was put on the banquet menu. Mitchell, citing a new work commitments at his law firm, DLA Piper, stepped down in May from the Oversight Committee of the Church Independent Reconciliation and Reparations Program. Oh yeah, it was because you have other commitments, or did he see the writing on the wall? Did George Mitchell know what was coming down the pipe? I'm sure he was alerted that this stuff was going to be released, so don't tell me it's because he's stepping down because he wants more to focus more on his law firm. BS. He stepped down because he knew the optics were bad. He stepped down because he knew he was going to go on blast about all of this. In a statement August 11th, Mitchell maintained he has never met Virginia Roberts, the Epstein accuser who had listed him among her many alleged abusers, along with a host of other bold-faced names, including former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, and Prince Andrew, son of Queen Elizabeth II. My body was put on the banquet menu for a powerful senator, George Mitchell, and another prominent Nobel Prize-winning scientist. Roberts wrote in an account of the years she allegedly spent as a self-described trafficking victim for Epstein and his powerful friends. They would be only some of the recognizable figures of the high society that became added to my list of clientele. That's harrowing, folks. It's so dark and so depressing to think that this goes on in our world, that girls like Virginia Roberts and the countless nameless other girls around the world who have been lost to this disgusting modern day slave trade have nobody to step up and defend them, have nobody to stand up in their corner and say enough is enough. How can they when people like powerful senators are involved in the trafficking themselves? Where do you turn then? That unpublished manuscript had remained under court seal for years after it was submitted as evidence in a 2015 defamation suit Roberts filed against Ghislaine Maxwell, a British socialite and co-conspirator and co-rapist and co-abuser and just all-around evil broad. Ghislaine Maxwell, a British socialite and one-time partner of Epstein, whom federal authorities are said to be investigating in the days since the financier, pedophile, hanged himself in his New York prison cell August 10th. That document and others included as part of Roberts' case were released earlier this month by the New York-based U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Roberts mentioned Mitchell again in a sworn deposition in 2016, saying she was instructed to give him a sexual massage while the former senator was visiting Epstein in Palm Beach, Florida. So what we need to do here is track that down. We need to find out how, when, and where Mitchell has been to that Florida residence. We need witnesses. We need all of it at this point. We need it all, whatever we can find. So all of you out there that like to do some digging, go ahead and dig into that and let me know what you come up with. I'll be doing the same. Mitchell in his statement dismissed her claims. I have never met, spoken with, or had any contact with Miss Roberts, the senator said. In my contacts with Mr. Epstein, I never observed or suspected any inappropriate conduct with underage girls. I only learned about his actions when they were reported to the media related to his prosecution in Florida. We have had no further contact. Oh, I'm sure, Mr. Mitchell. I'm sure you ran for the hills after he was arrested, of course. Well, why wouldn't you? It's all about self-preservation for weasels like you. I'm sure you went to ground, went and hid in your hole, and released your canned statements that mimicked all the rest of them. But guess what? It's not going to work. We're not believing you, and you're not getting off this time. An outstanding job. Mitchell has not been charged with a crime. Roberts' claims have not been tested in court, and there has been no indication that the senator has become a target of the ongoing federal investigation. Well, we don't know who is a target of the ongoing federal investigation at this point. We don't have any idea, so Mitchell might be part of it. Who knows? But what I do know is this. I believe Virginia Roberts way more than I believe any of these people, okay? Point blank, period. One man's opinion, these people are all lying. All right? These people all knew what was going on. These people all had their role to play. And at the very least, all of these people enabled Jeffrey Epstein's behavior for decades. Still, the church's compensation program should address the issue head-on and seek to reassure sex abuse victims that the allegations have no bearing on the program, said Laura Otten, an expert in nonprofit management at LaSalle University. They have to get out in front of it and distance themselves from this, while at the same time making it clear that they, like everyone else, are waiting for an investigation to complete its work, she said. Okay, so yeah, let's distance ourselves, but we don't really believe the survivor, though. We're going to distance ourselves because, optics and all. Not because we have compassion or empathy for the survivors. Not because it might be triggering for them if they see this idiot's face on TV or anything like that. No, forget about all that. It's all about the optics. Robert's allegations against Mitchell were not known when Philadelphia Archbishop Charles J. Chaput appointed him to lead the committee overseeing the IRRP in November, but his friendship with Epstein, then a convicted sex offender after a 2008 plea deal in Florida, was well documented. Exactly right. There's no leg to stand on here. There is no leg for any of you to stand on at this point. You knew exactly what Epstein was, okay? Epstein was giving you money as a politician. Do not deny it. Do not lie about it. It's obvious to everyone who's paying attention, Mr. Mitchell, that you're neck deep. Mitchell called Epstein a friend and a supporter in a 2003 New York Magazine profile. Epstein referred to Mitchell as the world's greatest negotiator. Sure, sounds like guys that really don't know each other, huh? No, it sounds like guys who were chummy. It sounds like guys that hung out together. It sounds like guys that would come over to Epstein's house and get themselves a nice little massage in their stupid-ass underwear. Okay, that's what it sounds like to me. As chairman of the Independent Oversight Committee last year, Mitchell and other members were tasked with drafting protocols and policies for the compensation program and with monitoring the claims process. The determination of payouts to individual claimants is handled by fund administrators Kenneth Feinberg and Camille Byros. Many who worked with the former senator on the compensation fund have been reluctant to discuss Robert's allegations or the impact they might have had on its work. Oversight Committee members Kelly B. Hodge, a former Philadelphia district attorney, and Charles Sheeler, Mitchell's former law partner, did not return requests for comment. Of course they didn't. And also, back up here where it says, what's his name? Kenneth Feinberg. That sounds sort of familiar. Now, I can't recall right now, and I'm not going to look it up while I'm reading this article, but Feinberg, I think, might have a role with Epstein's estate. So I'm going to have to take a look at that for sure. Lawrence F. Stengel, the retired federal judge from Lancaster who has taken over Mitchell's role as committee chairman, said he thought the senator had done an outstanding job. Of course he did. We protect our own, don't we? We have to protect our own, because if not, they'll talk about the skeletons in my closet maybe. These people are sick. These people that rule and lord over us like robber barons are sick, folks. I mean, absolutely, positively sick in the brain. I certainly wasn't aware of any allegations, Stengel said. I don't think anything like that factored into or filtered into the IRRP. He expressed concern for victims and victim advocates. He was very invested in the integrity of the process. Of course he was, so he can shield himself in this. Another shield for him, just like his charities. Well, what do you mean? I could have never done what Virginia says. I was overseeing the whole entire process of giving victims compensation from the church. Meanwhile, he don't give a shit about these victims. He don't care about survivors. If he did, he'd be coming forward and talking about everything he knows about Epstein. But no, he won't do that. More of the same. The fund itself has divided abuse victims, some of whom see the effort as an attempt by the church to short-circuit efforts in the state legislature to pass a law that would allow accusers to sue for abuse that falls outside the current statute of limitations. Not even a question. Criminal, a little bit different, obviously, unless there's, some sort of hard evidence, right? We have to have DNA, blah, blah, blah. But after the statute of limitations, that's going to be hard to pursue. But with the civil liability, of course, there needs to be a law on the books for sexual assault victims, underage sexual assault victims, to go and report this stuff after the fact. It just seems like common sense to me, folks. But then again, with our justice system, nothing's common and there is no sense. Since the fund's launch last year, more than 197 accusers have filed claims. Nearly 80 cases had received final determinations as of spring, with an average payout of more than $210,000 according to the program's reporting through May. $210 grand for a lifetime of PTSD, a lifetime of horrible memories, a lifetime of feeling like you can't breathe, a lifetime of panic attacks. I'll pass. That needs to be upped. Double that at least. The church has plenty of money. The Catholic Church has plenty of money, folks. They should just open up the vault underneath the Vatican and pay out some of these complaints. Each one of these kids, these are children, young men, young boys who are abused by these sick-ass priests. And 210 grand is at the end. That's the final accounting. That's what it costs? Nah, we're going to need more than that. Do better, Catholic Church. Those who are granted and accepted awards must agree not to sue if the state's laws change, as happened recently in New York and New Jersey. This is how sick they are. It's all about the money. The church should not care about what they're doling out to these victims, these survivors. All right? The church should care that this was happening on their watch, and they protected these nasty-ass priests, and they just moved them around the country so they could keep on doing what they did. And these young men had to go through life facing a life of scorn. Jordan K. Merson, an attorney who represents several clients seeking payments from the fund, said that trade-off has worked well for some of them, including victims who are older, ones who need money for therapy or counseling services, or those whose primary goal was simply getting the church to acknowledge their abuse. Those who need money for therapy or counseling services, the church should be paying for that. So you're telling me the chunk of change they get broken off, they have to use on counselors and therapy and God knows what else? Meanwhile, the church gets to clean their hands from all of this, and this is what George Mitchell was pushing for? This is what he wanted for these survivors? But for the people who have had their lives ruined by their experiences or been subjected to serious acts of abuse, the program cannot and does not provide the necessary compensation, Merson said. I've had some people go through the program and be very happy, and I've had some that aren't so happy. Yeah, none of them should be happy, okay? This isn't a quick buck situation. This is about compensation for the rest of your life, for you being ruined for the rest of your life by these sick bastards. And then Mitchell, the esteemed, the austere senior senator from Maine, coming forward and making a mockery of it all by sitting on this board as they're doling out peanuts to these victims. Boy, my blood pressure's up right now, folks. As for the allegations against Mitchell, lawyer Daniel F. Monahan said most of his clients remain unfazed. Given the suspicion many of them still harbor towards the church since their abuse, he said a lot of them would say it's just more of the same. Imagine that. These people have been abused not only by the church, who they trusted. I mean, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I grew up as a Catholic, most of us Italians, that's how we grew up. And that's supposed to be a place where you feel safe, where you can go and tell the priest whatever it is you need to tell him. And for these people, they went to a safe place like the church, and it turned into a house of horrors. And then when they try and seek some help and they go to the authorities, they get laughed at for years. Just like the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. Folks, this is a closer look at George Mitchell. This is a closer look at one of the men who ruled over us. This is a closer look at the man that is being credibly accused by Virginia Roberts of abusing her while she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. Get a good, hard look at who our rulers are and ask yourselves, how much longer are we going to put up with it? How much longer are we going to keep voting the same people back into office? When are they going to be held to account, folks? We have an election coming up. Maybe, just maybe, all of us should get together and make a pact, a pledge, everybody in the nation, to never vote in another incumbent again until there are term limits on these offices. Because look, you don't need more than 8 years as a senator. You don't need more than 8 years as a congressman. Okay? Keep it moving. They get entrenched, and then they become these sick, perverted men like George Mitchell obviously is. I have to tell you, folks, since the beginning of covering this case in October in earnest, when I really dove in, my whole entire worldview has changed. My whole entire worldview has changed. I do not believe a single word that any of these people that are so-called our rulers say to us. I fact-checked everything I hear from these people now. And even when you do that, you run into the problem of their lapdogs in the media making sure that they're providing cover for what their buddies say. And I, for one, I don't know about the rest of you out there, but I, for one, I'm tired of it. And I'm not going to take it anymore. I am not going to take what they say to me as the holy gospel anymore. Everything that is said to me from the president on down to the local administrators will be checked and will be rigorously vetted from here on out. Because let's be real, we have people like George Mitchell overseeing a compensation fund for victims of sexual abuse and assault. Meanwhile, he is being accused of the same crimes. And where is your media, folks? Where is the legacy media? Their silence says it all. All right, folks, that's it for this closer look into George Mitchell. And I will be back later on, obviously, tonight with the Daily Drop. But I wanted to get this one out there, and I wanted to get this one in the catalog. And I wanted to talk about this man for a little while because it's beyond the pale that people like this are not catching more flack, that people like this are not under more scrutiny. How is he avoiding the scrutiny? How is he avoiding the media barrage? And I'll leave that up to you, folks. I don't need to tell you that. I don't need to tell you how to think on this podcast. I don't need to tell you what it is on this podcast. You all already know. You know, you folks on this pod that are listening to this podcast have your finger on the pulse of what is going on. You've all had the Great Awakening at this point. You've all eaten the pill and woken up and said to yourself, holy shit, things are not what it seems. So I'm not telling you anything new. But make sure you spread this word around to those who might be on the fence, to those who, I heard a couple of things about this Jeffrey Epstein case, but it's a conspiracy theory. Make sure you're passing this information on to them, because this has to be brought completely and fully into the light. Not just the shade drawn back, folks, but the light poured into the room. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. And if you enjoy our content and you support what we're doing here and you want to, support that through GoFundMe, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. To everybody who has donated so far, thank you so much. And to the rest of you who keep sharing the podcast and who keep emailing me, I appreciate all of you riding shotgun with me through this whole entire creepy-ass, disgusting ordeal. Hopefully we arrive where we're going. Hopefully we get to a point where there is some justice for the survivors. And hopefully all of these people that have up to now been hiding are exposed for the predators that they are. Because you know what time it is. The year 2020, that's the year these predators, they turn into the prey. I'll be back tonight with the Daily Drop, and I hope everybody enjoys their Tuesday. Until later on, folks, enjoy it.
Es mejor llegar tarde a casa que nunca volver a llegar. Es mejor llegar tarde al trabajo que nunca volver a trabajar. Y es mejor recoger tarde a tus hijos que nunca volver a recogerlos. Llegar tarde a donde vayas por esperar a que pase el tren es mucho mejor que arriesgar tu vida tratando de ganarle el paso. Por algo existe el dicho, más vale tarde que nunca. Alto, el tren no para.
Mensaje de Nitsa.